Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for letting me come visit you. We have a little retirement home up in Lampasas, so two, three times a year I'm here in Texas. And this is my first time ever to come in the spring. So I'm enjoying this beautiful springtime very much, and enjoying the wildflowers. I am making the rounds as much as I can to talk to different state organizations, and in your case, Republic. We are in the process of reforming the national government. Now that sounds kind of strange because we all assume that we have a national government, but in fact what we have is a territorial government. The national government of this country was mothballed following the Civil War, and the original states were replaced by territorial states. And this is something that we have discovered in the process of researching the history of this country and of each state. They came in after the Civil War and they forced all of the states that were then organized to adopt a new constitution. And at the time, people didn't understand what all this was about. And in most cases, the new constitution was very similar to the old constitution, so it didn't seem like anything worth arguing over. However, what had happened is that the original state of Florida, for example, or the original state of Georgia, was being replaced by a territorial state of Florida, or a territorial state of Georgia. And these states of states appeared to be the same. They were operating under what appeared to be the same name, right? So using this deception, which is called a conversion, they converted the national states into territorial states. And at the same time, they took all of the property that was naturally being controlled by and owned by those national states and rolled them into trusts, state land trusts. So the original state of Texas was rolled into the Texas State Land Trust. And the original state of Georgia was rolled into the Georgia State Land Trust. And they did this all over this country. Now I have to go back and check, but I believe, if memory serves me right, that there were 37 actual original national level states enrolled at the time of the Civil War. And all of the rest of the states that were not states at the time of the Civil War are still in a quasi-state status. They are what I call states in waiting. They have corporate contracts to be treated as states. They have guarantees that say that they have all the same rights and prerogatives as all the other states. But in fact, they were never enrolled as states at the national level because we haven't had a national Congress to enroll them since 1860. Now this is a real concern because all of those states like Nevada, Utah, Wyoming, all the western states that we normally think of other than Texas and California are not really states. They don't have the standing in the world internationally that they should have. And they're still being administered by the federal government, which is the territorial and municipal levels of the government, which is what happened out in Oregon with all those people taking over the wildlife refuge and the problems that the Hammond ranchers had. They're in a situation where the federal agencies and the federal bureaucracy of the territorial and municipal levels of the national government are supposed to be in a proprietary caretaking capacity, and instead they've taken over. And so the drive is on to bring back the national states, the national level states. That doesn't mean we're replacing the territorial states. It means that we're creating the national level of our government. And in order to do that, we have to be functioning in our full capacity as land jurisdiction people. And that's another thing. You have all noticed, I'm sure, that something seems to be very wrong with the way our country is being operated. It's almost like it's upside down. If you're like we were in Wisconsin, you were taught as a child that the government proceeded from the people, right? The people delegated power to the counties delegated power to the states, and then the states delegated power via the constitutions to the federal government, right? But instead, it seems like the federal government employees are coming in and telling us what to do and treating us very badly in the process. So something's wrong. And as the little story about me becoming aware back in the early 70s or 80s, whenever it was, that Nelson Rockefeller didn't pay any taxes. I mean, how many incidents does it take like this before we realize something's rotten in Denmark or, you know, Poughkeepsie? I mean, this is not a good thing. So this is where the trail has led. The realization that our national government was mothballed 150 years ago, and we have been operating as a territorial government ever since. Now, the territorial government is one of 3 levels of the federal government. And I want to go over this because this is not all that well understood either. We start out with all of the power being vested in the people. Then we go to the county level. And in the land jurisdiction, which we are all part of, the land jurisdiction government of the county is vested in a jural assembly. Not a jural society, a jural assembly. So we start out and we organize our government as a jural assembly at the county level. Then the counties get together and they organize their government via a state assembly process at the state level. And then finally, we have a Congress of the states. And that's the national level. There is another possibility for us. We can also have what's called Continental Congress. And that's where we started out this entire country, was with a Continental Congress. And this is something people need to understand. There are different layers of our government that we've never been taught about. Let's go back to when the colonies got started. A colony is a farm family assembly. So these were groups of farm families that were organized as a colony. Those colonies gave rise to the states. And those are all soil jurisdiction. We don't talk about soil jurisdiction, but that's the fundamental jurisdiction, the highest level of jurisdiction and sovereignty that we have. And then, after the soil jurisdiction, we have the land jurisdiction. And that's what we most typically talk about. Land jurisdiction is international. Soil jurisdiction is national. Land jurisdiction is international. So when we came to wake up again and realize what was going on, we realized that we still had the land jurisdiction in our control, that the soil jurisdiction wasn't operating, and that the national level state of states were not operating. And that basically this entire country was being run by the territorial level government. Now, what is the territorial level government? When you look at the Constitution, all constitutions, by definition, are debt agreements. They basically spell out who's going to provide what services and who's going to organize the delivery of those services and who's going to pay for what. And when you look at this, you will see that there were actually 3 federal level constitutions. We're never taught about that either. The national level constitution was called the Constitution for the United States of America. And you have copies of that document in several different public libraries here in Texas. So it has the word for in it, not of. And there is a difference in the way United States of America is styled. It has a small u on the United, a capital S on states, a small o on of, and a large A on A, America, okay, States of America. So that contract was actually between the United States of America, unincorporated, and the service provider, States of America. Now this is where the big confusion over the Articles of Confederation comes in too. People say that the Articles of Confederation were rolled into the Constitution somehow. They think that the Articles of Confederation disappeared, but there's absolutely no record of them ever being repealed. And in order to be repealed, it has to be repealed, right? So that tells you right there, a lot of this history is history that we know because of what isn't there. And we know that the Articles of Confederation were never repealed by anybody. So the Articles of Confederation still stand, but what were they? Well, they were a second union of states. The first union of states was created September 9th, 1776, when they created the United States of America unincorporated. The second union of states, the Confederation, was created in 1781. And that was called the States of America. So you had 2 unions operating in 2 different capacities. One that was operating at the international level, one that was operating at the national level. And during the Civil War, the national level union was dismembered and torn apart and was never reformed. So even though it was never repealed, it simply got mothballed, usurped upon, shoved aside, substituted by the territorial government. Yeah, I know, that's shocking, but that's actually what went on. And now we're in the process of correcting that. So when we're talking about the state of Michigan getting organized, we're not talking about any state of Michigan you've ever known of in your lifetime. We're talking about a national level, land jurisdiction, state of Michigan. And we now have 30 states reporting. 30 out of the 37 we need. And all of this is coming to a head, folks, because both the territorial and the municipal levels of the government are bankrupt. Now, I had some questions here, and I promised I would answer about this. We had 3 states where I was getting these calls all of a sudden, help, help, you know, I just got this notice in the mail, a $120,000 tax bill on my property that I have to pay in 30 days or I'm going to be evicted. You know, I thought I paid all of my taxes. I was clear for the year. And suddenly I have this gigantic tax bill that I have to pay. And this was happening in 3 different states. And we delved into it and we figured out that this was the result of the municipal government going bankrupt. They are holding all of our property as surety for their debts. They've basically pulled a fast one. They've stolen our identity. They have laid claim to us, basically told the lie that we were all trust properties, that we were all wards of the state. And they have then created trusts accordingly. Now I've got a little diagram on my website and it shows where our trade name, which is the name that you're all familiar with, upper, lower case, first, middle, last, that you grew up with using in grade school. Right, she has a copy of it back there. It shows you that the trade name is missing. Well, how could it be that your trade name is missing? Well, it's missing from the public record. It's missing from the land jurisdiction record because your parents never knew that they had to record it. And what happened was this territorial corporation that is here under the provisions of Article 4 of the Constitution to provide essential governmental services came in and claimed your name as that of a trust property, a ward of the state. They copyrighted your name, and that copyright is being held by the British Crown Corporation. So your name is property that they used to accumulate debt against. It's called hypothecation of debt. And so they have run up your credit, just like any credit card snatcher, and left you to pay their bills. And now they're bankrupt. So their secondary creditors are coming after Americans under all these false presumptions. And those gigantic property tax bills, that was secondary creditors coming in and operating under the guise of U.S. trustees to assess all of this extra property tax against anybody's name that they had on the tax rolls. And we had to go in and operate the international level of the existing government, which is the United States of America unincorporated. We had to go in and protest, object, bring suit, and shut down those kinds of claims. And if we hadn't done that, everybody in America by now would be getting these gigantic tax bills. Now they're trying to phase it in and get their way anyway by beginning a more gradual approach. And so one of the gentlemen here showed me today an announcement that their property taxes are going up by 49% over 5 years. And this has all basically been foisted off on people by fraud, by false claims in commerce. And it's a very serious situation. It's something that we're dealing with as best we can, but it's going to require a lot of action by a lot of people to band together and say no to this and bring forward the kinds of actions that are necessary. And you know, I'm looking around here and there's been a lot of discussion about the need for younger people to get involved. Well, I'll tell you what, the younger people need to get involved because they're the ones that are going to bear the brunt of this. So, but that's all the bad news. And that's the motivation. Okay, this is why it's urgent that everybody get clued in and start taking action in their own behalf, but it's also why we need to get active and take action in behalf of our counties and our states. Because if we don't, the secondary creditors of those bankruptcies are going to come in here and they're going to own everything and we're going to own nothing. And they even had it set up so that they had their commercial mercenary armies already set up here, ready to go. So I'm sure some of you have seen articles on the web where, you know, the FEMA had invested millions of body bags and billions of rounds of ammunition. They were going to use these agencies as basically mercenary armies on our soil to come evict us from our homes and businesses and resettle us, just like the British government did in Ireland in the 1850s. They thought they were going to get away with this. And they almost did. You know, if we hadn't been awake and hadn't raised our hands and said, uh-oh, no. If we hadn't given civil orders to the Joint Chiefs of Staff back in 2014, they would have gotten away with this. So we're dealing with some very disreputable, very criminal elements that have been hijacking our government for 150 years. And this is all the bad news. I do have good news. First and foremost, the good news is that we have been able to stop them. We have been able to operate the United States of America unincorporated is still standing. It is still populated. We are still here and we are still holding our ground. We're still objecting to all this. We've still brought forward all of the court battles. We have court cases in 6 major courts worldwide. We have gone to Rome. We have pressed our claims. We have done everything necessary to make sure that nothing bad happens to the American people. But I just felt like you all needed to know this is a very serious situation we're in, and we need to really pay attention. And when you get these gigantic tax bills, you'll know what the presumptions are that they're using to assess you 49% more over a course of 5 years. Or they're sending you a suddenly out of the blue a gigantic tax bill for, you know, $20, $30, $40, $100,000 that you're supposed to just pull out of your pocket and hand over to them. It's the secondary creditors of these bankrupt federal corporations. Now, what can you do for your own families? All right, this goes to the heart of the concept of capacity. Now, we all work in different capacities. You might be here today as a member of this Republic Congress, right? That's a capacity. It's an office or a job that you do. You might also have a capacity as a grandma, as I do. You might have a capacity as a waitress at a charity function. Well, we all have different capacities, and so we all have different persons. Your trade name that your parents gave you when you were born is a capacity. That's your trade name that you use in public when you're standing on the land jurisdiction of the state where you were born. Unfortunately, there's a little oddball thing in the law that also makes it the name of a foreign situs trust when you're operating in the international jurisdiction of the sea. And back in 1933, Franklin Delano Roosevelt pulled off the heist of heists, the biggest crime in history, when he presumed upon the American people to declare that your trade names were actually the names of foreign situs trusts in the international jurisdiction of the sea. He removed all of our trade names to international jurisdiction with the stroke of a pen, which is known as an unlawful conversion. And if you go back and look at the complaint that was filed by Congressman Louis T. McFadden, who was co-chair of the House Banking Committee at that time, you'll see that he characterized it as unlawful conversion.